Conversations.
I'm Dan Brawley. I'm the Chief Instigating Officer at Cucalorus. And today, for our Cucalorus Conversations podcast, I have David Gordon Green, the director of George Washington, which is screening on June 27th at Jengo's Playhouse. David, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
Yeah, man. So I want to set the scene a little bit. Um, Late 90s in North Carolina. Josh and Jonas Pate made The Grave, I think, in like 95. Owner Tukel made Ding-a-Ling-less in Wilmington in the around the same time. You graduated from the UNC School of the Arts in what year? 98?
That's
Yeah.
right.
And then how did George Washington come together? What was happening for you?
Well, gone to the North Carolina School of the Arts in Winston-Salem and had a great collective of aspiring filmmaker friends with a big appetite and not big egos and just an excitement to get our hands dirty. And we graduated and me and Paul Schneider, one of our actors, went out to Los Angeles and gave it a pretty brief chapter before we realized this is not our flavor, and what can we do to dive in head first? And so went back to the school and kind of just started rallying people to see what we could get stirred up. People like Orner Tickell were making movies like House of Pancakes and introduced me to Brian Kupko and Joe Dunton. And so just kind of the network, once you just start saying, uh, I'm going to do this, people start saying, are you really going to do this? And you say, I'm really going to do this. And then they say, all right, well, maybe you need to meet so and so, or could I make an introduction or do something to be helpful? And the momentum starts to build. And so that's what it was with that movie is I really looked primarily to the class graduating behind me and just said to a lot of my friends, hey, if you've got an apartment, keep the lease. If you're on your parents' insurance, say pretty please, hang on a little bit longer. And as close to graduation as I can squeeze this production, we're going to go make something. And I don't know what it is yet, but I'm saving my money and I'm working all these jobs trying to put it in the bank and build up some funds to be able to create something. And the only thing I knew was I wanted to shoot it on 35 millimeter. And that was just kind of a pretentious audacity at a time when everybody was looking to make things cheaper and grittier as I wanted to make something bigger and prettier. So uh, that was the intention. And where we were living in Winston-Salem was just a wonderful neighborhood of these great voices and faces um, and a real melting pot of personalities and perspectives on the world. And so just started kind of culminating ideas and sense of characters. And I knew I wanted to make a movie about kids and a perspective of youth inspired by movies like Killer of Sheep, or there's a short film called A Day with the Boys, these things that had really caught my eye in a way that I looked at great kid performances as being production value. You know, I'm not going to build sets, but I can find cool kids and let them be them, and those dynamics can be really successful when the chemistry works.
So I saw the film at the Edinburgh Film Festival. My first job
Ooh.
was at the Edinburgh Film Festival. And man, I was just struck by the beauty of the film. It's gorgeously photographed and it captured an innocence that I think is really difficult in front of the camera to really pull that off. Can you talk about the Tim Orr and about, you shot on 35 millimeter. I mean, you did make some pretty bold choices. Did it feel impossible at any point? And how did you capture that sort of like innocent beauty without a whole lot of production?
Well, I'll give a lot of that credit to Tim Orr, our cinematographer, and Richard Wright, our production designer. And together, I graduated with Tim, and Tim and I had made a documentary in film school out in Greensboro about it was called AI, but it was about the artificial insemination of the Angus cow. So, and we really kind of clicked creatively and drive into our locations. We just say, oh, we have the same sense of music and interests in art and things like that. And so we really kind of clicked. And when we graduated, his eye had always appealed to me. And I said, if I can get this movie going, can you quit your day job or at least take a little hiatus and come and shoot it for me? And then the class below, Richard Wright was a cinematography major. And when I went back to the area and started kind of recruiting people to be a part of it, he said, "Do you have a DP?" I said, "Yeah, Tim's going to shoot it." And he said, "Do you have a production designer?" And I said, "No, we don't yet." And he's like, "Oh, maybe I can do that." And so, I mean, literally, I was talking to him this morning. He's been the production designer on most of my films and on Righteous Gemstones and the stuff we continue to create today. But his concentration in film school was a cinematographer. And so it's great to have the kind of connections, communications of those disciplines between Tim and Richard. And really, honestly, that movie, the heavy lifting was those two departments because we had about a $400 production design budget and about a $600 camera budget. And they were able to find the right place to put a camera to be able to make it look like something more extraordinary than if you were just walking through our locations. It's the right time of day, it's this angle instead of that angle, and really being specific about expressing themselves through composition. So the partnership there I mean, it just kind of blew my mind of what we could do. So I could focus on performances and work with the cast. And then also an invaluable element was Paul Schneider, who the actor was also he came from an editing background in film school, and so we had a perspective there, and so he could help me kind of communicate through the young performers and try to make sure that there was some thread of narrative there because it was very obviously it's a very loose narrative. And so had his discipline there from an editorial background to help construct that. So what we were able to accomplish together for $5 was something that I'll always be really proud of.
Let's talk about, you mentioned the cast. Let's talk about that a little bit. Eddie Rouse, Paul Schneider, but then mostly, kids from the neighborhood, untrained. Tell me about how you developed that chemistry and also how you brought Eddie Rouse into the picture.
Yeah, so Eddie, I had done a couple of short films in film school. One which was the inspiration for George Washington. It was a movie called Pleasant Grove, and I was trying to cast a kid for Pleasant Grove, and I was at a bowling alley and I saw this kid talking to his dad, and I was just like eavesdropping on him. And I liked the dynamic, and I went up to the dad. I was like, "Hey, I'm interested in your kid to be in this film project at school I've got going." And he's like, "My kid's in trouble, but I'll be in it." And that was Eddie Rouse. Um, so
That's
we became
incredible.
friends after that, very close collaborators. He passed away sadly a few years ago. But it was amazing watching his career really start to bloom and a lot of the projects that he did and his energy was infectious, his talent was vast, and even his funeral was just full of so many wonderful characters coming to celebrate the curiosity of Eddie Rouse.
Now, was this in Winston-Salem? Did Eddie Rouse live in Winston-Salem?
He lived in Winston-Salem, and it was just kind of coincidental. I ran into him looking for kid actors, and and then he stepped into my life and then was a big part of it for 15 years, you know.
Yeah. And then the kids, like what was the casting process like?
Kids, same thing. Like, I had done a short film with Candace Evanovsky, the young girl that plays Nausea in the movie, and I met her through there was a secretary at our school that introduced me to a hairstylist that on Tuesdays gave a half off to kids or something. There was some I can't remember exactly what the networking was, but it was really non-traditional. And so then I met Candace through that, and then I worked with her on a short film. So I actually wrote the role in George Washington for her because I was just so charmed by her charisma. And then had some open call auditions in the area and met Rachel. A friend of mine, Chad Hanley, was a Wilmington resident and a film school buddy of mine who's a great screenwriter now. And I believe I was talking to his pastor about kids at his church in Wilmington when I was talking to Brian and Joe about cameras, and he introduced me to Donald, who was kind of the centerpiece George character of the film. And we just went for a walk on the beach and hit it off, and he had interesting things to say about life, and I was curious about him. And then Damian Lee, who is one of my great friends to this day, who I met through I believe, a Durham talent agent and introduced me to Damien and Curtis on a day when I was driving through Durham. And just, I think I got a conference room at a hotel and just wanted to see what Raleigh Durham talent was like um, and recruited a bunch of kids. And my producer, Sasha Mueller, was instrumental in like trying to find our version of of what a movie would what a real movie would do. And so we had our mini micro version of some of that process and met a local North Carolina talent agent that would, that didn't hang up the phone when we called, which most of them would because you don't have any money to pay anybody. So what are you doing? Uh, and so it was just meeting these kids and trying to figure out the pieces of the puzzle and the dynamic, the chemistry, and then altering the script a little bit for them. And then on the day, letting them honestly be them and say what they wanted to say. And the movie was like two or three takes for every scene, every moment, if that, sometimes one. And so I wasn't looking for specific memorization. Nothing needed to be precise in this movie. It was more about a vibe. Can we make a vibe that feels dreamy and is a somewhat stylized, romanticized view of growing up in the South and yeah, how they look to each other instead of the grown-up world around them and where how if they fit into their environment, their space, trying to capture the rustic industry collapsing and Mother Nature coming back through the cracks of the concrete and all that stuff was just a part of living in North Carolina and not far from where I lived in Texas when I was growing up. So it was all just part of what can we do to make something very personal in this portrait.
So let's go back. I mean, the script, can you talk about how you developed that and how you modified that along the way? Does it relate back to some specific things that happened in your childhood or?
Yeah, very specific things, disappearances of children growing up in Dallas. I remember there was this girl, uh, Christy Proctor, and for a year nobody knew where she was, and there were posted signs all over. And so your imagination would go to all these places of what happened and where, and that was a really um, kind of pivotal psychological chapter of adolescence in Dallas is the who done it and why. And then my imagination would also go to the kind of camaraderie that I had as a kid and that was captured really effectively in movies like Stand By Me that I saw when I was 12 years old when it came out um, and spoke to me personally in a way that I thought if I can make a movie about death and a movie about friendship in a way that movie kind of had its very personal Stephen King through Bruce and Ray through Rob Reiner portal, then I could try to do my version of that, which again was looking to like Charles Burnett's film Killer of Sheep was one that was really important to me in a way that it felt slightly more playful, slightly more improvised, slightly less Hollywood, and that was something that in trying to strategize how I was going to sculpt something that I could afford and bring myself to, and these collaborators that had so many extraordinary contributions, um, it just felt like the right type of recipe.
Yeah. Um, Clearly something really special was happening at the School of the Arts. I mean, was it some in the water? I mean, you and Paul and Jeff Nichols, I mean, the list, Danny McBride of people who
Greg
were,
Zobel I was talking to yesterday, and yeah, just a really amazing group of people that what the thing that links us is that we didn't have Hollywood contacts and we didn't have rich parents and a lot of the things that I think can be ways that people have a little bit more of an access to some of these opportunities. We also weren't academics and we couldn't get into and we couldn't afford the fancy film schools, but we did have each other to look to and say, I can't pick up the phone and call someone to give me the gig, but I can call you and we can roll up our sleeves and do as best as we can. And so there's even to this day there's like this weird working class work ethic that we bring to the movies that we make. And you can see that in a lot of the flavors of the film and the atmospheres of the film, but you can also see it in just our discipline, the way that we there's a lot of loyalty, there's a lot of reliance and dependability and these kind of qualities that you don't get with entitlement. You get when you have the right appetite and the right appreciation for each other.
yeah. Um, and so when George Washington came out, obviously it received some pretty incredible critical praise. Did that help you in the next phase of your career, or was it sort of were you still starting from scratch?
my career has just been a wild roller coaster of, you start getting reviews like this and you think this is amazing, but that comes after you've been rejected from the Sundance Film Festival and the gatekeepers of Hollywood say they don't give a shit. So it's trying to figure out what your path is, which is different from any pioneers before you. And so it's balanced with extraordinary disappointment. So I would say, yeah, great. The movie is rejected from most of the major film festivals. So now I'm disappointed, and what the hell do I do with this thing, this creature, this creation? It gets into film festival, it starts finding acclaim. You're like, this is amazing, and it feels so great. It comes out and it makes no money at the box office. You're like, wait. So it's just a wild ride of I can't believe this is happening, and I can't believe this is happening. So uh, that's happened a lot in my life from the great successes that I've been a part of and the great disappointments that I've struggled through. And so I think it's all exercise. But to answer your question, it it opened enough doors and built enough relationships, and I schmoozed at enough film festivals and made enough friends where we could kind of start to put together some of our own ambition in terms of next projects. And so but we find the right money and we get Jane Damanian and Sony Pictures Classics that after they saw some of the acclaim that George Washington had built and they knew that this had a little bit more of a accessible connective tissue and a love story, and we were looking to talent like Zoe Deschanel and some up and coming actors to work alongside Paul, and so they got behind us, were supportive, and helped us create something that again is like very specific DNA to who we are on this earth, and it was just amazing to be able to work with Paul and put that together and keep our team for the most part from George Washington production designers and composers and editors and the people that we'd started building a relationship with, we weren't just saying, see you later. We were building a real portfolio together.
And you're still making films in the South. I mean, North Carolina, South Carolina. Tell me about what that means for you personally to be making films in the South.
I live in Charleston, but I could live anywhere. I love it. The South is comfortable, and I like the characters and some of the salty juxtapositions and contradictions of a lot of where the history meets the evolutions and all that stuff is kind of appealing to me. And just most of my life, yeah, but born in Arkansas and just bounced around in various locales, but always seemed to migrate back to Carolinas for some reason or another. And a lot of that is the friends I've made and the landscape that I'm familiar with and comfortable with. And I love to be within arm's reach of the mountains and the beach. So if I can get away from one or the other quickly, that's part of the code too.
I think the last time I ran into you was at a coffee shop at Riceville Beach. And I'm sure Wilmington filmmakers would be curious. Do you have any projects coming to North Carolina anytime soon? What's in the tank for you right now?
Oh, always cooking. We wrapped up our fourth season of Righteous Gemstones, which we shot here at home. With the Halloween movies, we're always chasing incentives. So we go from the first one was filmed in Charleston, second one Wilmington, third one Savannah, Georgia. Um, and at the moment, it's just trying to put together feature projects. I've got a couple of TV pilots that are taking me in more traditional regional directions, but always developing stuff. We've got our company Rough House here in Charleston and developing ideas to shoot here. Got some great projects that are seeds of ideas that are starting to happen, but nothing real yet, but always curious about what the community is going to bring to us and what we'll bring to them.
Are you still casting at bowling alleys? Where should we go bowling if we want to be?
Always go bowling. Always be bowling. But it's a great place where you can spy on people because there's a reason just to kind of like keep your ears alive because it's not like a dinner table where it looks weird when you're eavesdropping. It's everybody's a little bit active. Nobody gets too situated. They stand up, they sit down, they roll a few, they jump up and down, they get pissed off, they drink a beer, and there's a like nice little migratory vibe to a bowling alley that it's one of the key places I go to keep my eyes on the characters.
Well, David, thanks for joining us again. June 27th at Jengo's Playhouse. We're screening George Washington, at this point, an icon of American indie film. Any last thoughts, David, that you want to share with us?
No, just I think part of my fingerprint as a filmmaker is was born in the Carolinas and will always be here, and so it's just awesome that Cucalorus is there, and the filmmaking community is so vast there and always expanding. And so looking forward to sharing that and looking forward to sharing other future projects.